Kian had been traveling across the barren plains of planet Xiron for hours. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the cracked, rocky surface. Xiron was quiet to quiet. The wind howled occasionally, carrying dust that stung his eyes, but something about this silence felt different today. Almost like the planet was holding its breath, Kian tightened his pack and checked his supplies. Water, rations, basic tools, all there. He was a scout for the human exploration team, sent to map uncharted territories and report any unusual activity. So far, Xiron seemed empty. No cities, no alien life, no signs of civilization, just endless rock and dust. But then, he heard a soft, almost desperate sound. It was faint, like a whisper carried by the wind. Kian froze, listening carefully. His heart raced. This was not the sound of wind or rocks shifting. It was crying. He scanned the horizon, trying to locate the source. The sound came again, slightly louder. Kian followed it, moving cautiously over jagged stones. The crying grew stronger, filled with a raw vulnerability that made his chest tighten. Finally, behind a crumbling wall of what looked like an old alien structure, he saw her, a small figure huddled against the rubble. She was tiny, almost childlike, with delicate limbs and skin that shimmered faintly under Xiron's sun. Her eyes were wide and watery, glowing a soft amber color. She looked fragile, as if a strong wind could blow her away. Kian's heart ached at the sight. He knelt down, keeping his voice calm. "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" The girl flinched, shrinking further into the shadows. Her hands clutched a thin piece of cloth, and her ribs showed faintly beneath her skin. Hunger and fear were written all over her small frame. Kian slowly reached into his pack and pulled out a ration bar. "Here, you can have this," he said. Gently, "It's safe to eat." The girl stared at the food for a long moment. Her eyes flickered with confusion, then something else, fear, maybe. She shook her head slightly, backing away. "It's okay," Kian said softly, moving just a little closer. "I won't hurt you. I just want to help." After what felt like an eternity, she hesitated, then slowly reached out a trembling hand. Her fingers barely touched the bar before she pulled it back and clutched it to her chest. Her body shook. And then, quietly, tears began to fall. Kian didn't move. He didn't speak. He just waited, letting her know it was safe. Finally, she sank to the ground, letting herself eat. Every bite seemed precious, as if she hadn't tasted food in weeks. Her tears didn't stop, and she whispered something in a language Kian didn't understand. "It's okay," he murmured. "You're safe now. You don't have to be afraid." She looked up at him, eyes wide and filled with emotion. Kian could see the fear, the relief, and something else, gratitude. He realized that this small, starving girl had probably never trusted anyone before. Not like this. After she finished the ration, she leaned back and looked at him silently. Kian noticed her body trembling, not from hunger anymore, but from emotion. She couldn't speak, but her eyes told a story of loss and loneliness. Kian sighed. "My name is Kian. What's yours?" The girl hesitated, then, in a small, soft voice, she whispered, "Nira, Nira." He repeated, smiling gently, "That's a beautiful name. I'm glad I found you." Nira's lips trembled. She wanted to say something, but the words didn't come. Kian nodded, understanding. Words weren't always necessary. Sometimes, just being there was enough. He offered her a hand. "Come on. Let's find somewhere safe. You shouldn't stay out here alone." Nira looked at his hand for a long moment. Finally, she placed hers in his. Her skin was cool and soft, and she held on tightly, as if afraid he might disappear. As they walked together, Kian glanced at her and felt a surge of determination. She was alone in a strange world, vulnerable and weak, yet somehow resilient. He would do everything he could to keep her safe. The ruined city stretched around them, empty and eerie. Broken towers leaned at strange angles, and shattered streets were covered in dust. Kian kept his senses sharp, alert for any danger. Xiron was quiet, but he knew that didn't mean it was safe. "Where are you from, Nira?" he asked gently. She looked down, hugging herself. Slowly, she whispered a single word, tribe. Kian nodded, understanding enough. She must have come from a group, a community of her people. But now, she was alone. His heart clenched at the thought. They walked for hours, finding temporary shelter in the shadow of a collapsed building. Kian used his tools to create a small fire, the warmth offering comfort against the cold Zyran wind. Nira stayed close, her eyes watching him carefully, still unsure, but trusting him more than before. Kian shared some of his water and rations, and Nira ate quietly, still tearful but calmer. For the first time in what must have been a long while, she felt safe enough to rest. As night fell, the stars of Zyran's sky shimmered above them. Kian looked at Nira, who was curled up beside the fire, and felt a strong sense of responsibility. This little girl's life had changed the moment he found her. He whispered softly, "Don't worry, Nira. I'll take care of you. You're not alone anymore." Nira closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the fire and Kian's presence soothe her. The first night on Zyran was calm, but Kian knew the journey ahead would be full of challenges. Yet, for now, it was enough that they had found each other, and in that quiet, lonely place, a fragile bond began to form, a bond that would grow stronger with every trial they faced together. The next morning, Zyran's pale sun rose slowly, painting the barren landscape in soft orange light. Kian stirred first, checking their surroundings carefully. The ruins were silent, with only the occasional gust of wind echoing through broken walls. Nira was still asleep, her small frame curled up near the fire. Kian quietly prepared some water and rations for breakfast, careful not to wake her. When Nira opened her eyes, she looked around cautiously. Kian smiled gently. "Good morning." "Nira, did you sleep okay?" She nodded slightly, her voice barely a whisper. Safe. Kian handed her a small piece of bread. She hesitated for a moment, then accepted it, eating slowly. He watched her carefully, noticing how her hands trembled ever so slightly. She was still weak from hunger, but each bite gave her a little more strength. "We should keep moving," Kian said softly after they finished eating. "There might be other survivors or places where we can find shelter. Staying here too long could be dangerous." Nira nodded, trusting him. They stepped out into the dusty streets of the ruined city. Kian kept his eyes and ears alert. Zyran was quiet, but quiet often meant hidden danger. As they walked, Kian tried to learn more about Nira. "Tell me about your tribe. Nira, where were you from?" Her amber eyes filled with sadness, and she looked down. "Gaunt enemies took them." Her words were broken and short, but the meaning was clear. Her people had been attacked, and she had survived alone. Kian felt a pang of sorrow. "I'm so sorry, Nira. That must have been very hard for you." Nira's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. Instead, she held his hand for a moment. The gesture was small, but it spoke volumes. She trusted him, and he promised to keep her safe. They continued walking, moving carefully through the ruins. Kian pointed out safe paths, places to hide, and ways to find clean water. Nira watched closely, learning quickly. Even though she was small and fragile, her mind was sharp. She noticed details Kian sometimes missed: a loose rock that could fall, shadows that hid movement, and the faint tracks of animals or other aliens. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher. Kian decided to rest near a small stream that trickled through the rocks. Nira knelt by the water, dipping her hands and drinking carefully. She looked at Kian and smiled faintly, her first genuine smile since he found her. "You're getting stronger," Kian said warmly. "Your body needs water and food, but your mind is learning fast too." Nira nodded, and then, almost shyly, she reached into her small bag and pulled out a smooth, shiny stone. "Gift," she said softly. Kian accepted it, curious. The stone shimmered with colors he had never seen before. "It's beautiful, Nira. Thank you. I'll keep it safe." The simple exchange brought them closer. Kian realized that small gestures mattered. Trust was built slowly, and this fragile bond was growing stronger with each shared meal, each kind word, each moment of care. As the day progressed, Kian and Nira heard faint noises, shouts, mechanical clanking, and the distant roar of engines. Kian's instincts kicked in. We need to move. Those are not friendly sounds. He led Nira through narrow alleys and hidden tunnels, avoiding the main streets. They glimpsed figures moving in the distance, strange, armored creatures that seemed to be searching for something. Kian knew immediately these were scavengers, likely looking for survivors like Nira. Stay close, he whispered. Do exactly what I do. Nira followed silently, her trust in him absolute. They moved like shadows, ducking behind walls and slipping through cracks in the ruins. Kian admired her courage. Despite being so young and small, she did not panic. She mirrored his movements, her senses sharp and alert. By evening, they reached a hidden cave at the edge of the city. It was small but safe, with a narrow entrance that could be defended easily. Kian lit a small fire and unpacked some rations. Nira ate quietly, but her eyes were bright with curiosity. You're very brave, Nira, Kian said softly. Not many could move through a city like that and stay so calm. She looked down, then up at him, and for a moment, words failed her. Instead, she touched the side of her chest, then pointed at him. Kian understood. She was thanking him. They ate together, sitting close to the warmth of the fire. The night was calm, with stars twinkling in the Zyran sky. Kian looked at Nira and felt a sense of responsibility heavier than anything he had ever known. She was not just a child, she was a survivor, a symbol of hope for her people, and he had promised to protect her. Suddenly, a noise outside made them freeze. The wind shifted, carrying faint footsteps. Kian stood slowly, signaling Nira to stay back. He peeked outside the cave entrance. Shadows moved across the rocks, two figures, scanning the area. Kian's heart pounded. These were scavengers, searching for anything valuable. He whispered to Nira, stay inside. Don't make a sound. The figures approached the cave entrance. Their voices low and harsh. Kian's mind raced. He needed a plan to keep Nira safe. Using a small trick he had learned from past missions, he lit a torch near the entrance and tossed it aside. The flames drew the attention of the scavengers, giving him time to move Nira further inside the cave. They huddled together, listening as the scavengers moved past the entrance. Unaware of the small tunnel leading deeper into the cave, Kian exhaled slowly, relief washing over him. Nira's small hand gripped his arm. Trembling slightly, you're safe, he whispered. I promise, I won't let anyone hurt you. Nira's tears came quietly this time, not from hunger or fear, but from relief. She had faced danger alone before, but now she was not alone. She had Kian. That night, as they lay near the fire, Nira drifted to sleep. Her small body relaxed for the first time in a long while. Kian watched over her, silently vowing that he would never let harm come to her. The bond between them was fragile, like a new sprout in barren soil, but it was real, built on trust, care, and courage. And in the cold, harsh world of Zyran, that bond would be their greatest strength. Kian knew the journey ahead would be long and dangerous. But as he looked at Nira, sleeping peacefully, he also knew this. Together, they could face anything. And for the first time since he landed on Zyran, Kian felt hope not just for himself, but for the little alien girl who had cried tears of relief over a simple act of kindness. The next morning, Zyran's sky was painted with soft hues of pink and gold. Kian and Nira had spent the night in the safety of the hidden cave, and the quiet moments had allowed them to rest. Nira woke first, stretching carefully, her eyes bright, but still cautious. Kian handed her a small water container. Drink slowly, he said. We have a long day ahead. Nira nodded, her small fingers wrapping around the container. She drank carefully, her eyes flicking to Kian as if seeking permission. He smiled, and she relaxed. After breakfast, Kian decided it was time to teach Nira more about surviving on Zyran. You need to know how to find food and stay safe, he said. This planet is harsh, but if we work together, we can stay ahead of danger. Nira listened carefully, absorbing every word. She was quick to learn, her mind sharp despite her small body. Kian showed her how to identify edible plants and insects. He taught her how to use the landscape to hide from predators and hostile scavengers. He even showed her how to make small tools from rocks and branches. You're a fast learner. Kian said, impressed. You'll be ready to handle challenges on your own soon. Nira smiled faintly, a quiet sense of pride shining in her amber eyes. She practiced what Kian taught her, carefully examining the plants near the stream. Kian watched, silently proud of her determination. As the day went on, they traveled further from the ruined city. Kian wanted to find a safer place, somewhere with more shelter and resources. Along the way, Nira began to share small pieces of her own knowledge. She could sense movements and vibrations in the ground that Kian could not. She could hear distant creatures and detect subtle changes in the environment. Your senses are amazing, Kian said. You notice things I could never see. Nira nodded, a small smile on her face. She felt proud to teach Kian something. In return, the bond between them grew stronger with each lesson, each shared discovery. By late afternoon, they arrived at a shallow valley surrounded by rocky cliffs. It was quiet and hidden, the perfect place for shelter. Kian set up a small camp near a freshwater pool, while Nira explored cautiously, her curiosity growing. As Nira wandered, she found remnants of alien technology, strange machines half buried in sand. Her eyes widened with curiosity. Kian, what is this? She asked. Kian joined her, examining the devices. Old technology, he said, left behind by other aliens long ago. Some of it might still work. We can use it to our advantage if we are careful. Nira's eyes lit up. She had never seen humans work with technology like this before. She watched as Kian repaired a small communication device, explaining its functions. Slowly, she began to understand the logic behind it. As evening fell, Kian and Nira sat by the pool, sharing a quiet meal. Nira's hands moved faster now, her confidence growing. She had learned so much in such a short time. And Kian noticed that her small frame carried a new strength. She was still vulnerable, but she was no longer helpless. Suddenly, a low hum echoed across the valley. Kian's senses sharpened immediately. Nira, stay close, he whispered. From the shadows emerged several figures, alien scavengers. Kian recognized them from before, large, armored creatures with glowing eyes. Searching for survivors, Nira froze beside him, but Kian put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Remember what I taught you, he said quietly. Stay hidden, stay calm, and watch my movements. The scavengers moved closer, their voices harsh and strange. Kian led Nira behind rocks and bushes, keeping them out of sight. She mirrored his movements perfectly, crouching low and holding her breath. Kian noticed that Nira's senses were helping him too. She pointed to faint footprints leading away from the pool. They come from there, she whispered. Kian nodded, impressed. Together, they moved silently, avoiding the patrol. Hours passed, and the scavengers finally left. Kian and Nira exhaled quietly, relief washing over them. You did very well, Nira, Kian said. Your senses saved us both. Nira smiled shyly. Learn from you, she said. Kian felt a surge of pride. She was growing stronger, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. Each day, she became more capable, more resilient. He realized that survival was not only about strength, it was about learning, adapting, and trusting others. That night, as they lay under the stars, Nira spoke softly. Kian, I scared before, alone, but not now. Kian turned to her, smiling. You're safe now, Nira, and I'll do everything I can to protect you. For the first time since he found her, Nira relaxed completely. She felt a new sense of hope. She was learning from Kian, growing stronger, and discovering that humans were not always strangers to be feared. They could be protectors, friends, even family. The bond between them deepened with each lesson, each shared moment. Kian understood that Nira was not just a child in need of protection, she was a survivor with courage and potential, and together they could face any danger Zion might send their way. As they drifted off to sleep, Kian looked at the quiet alien girl beside him and felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey ahead would be difficult, but with trust, learning, and courage. They could survive and perhaps even thrive in this harsh world. The stars above shimmered like distant beacons of hope, and for the first time, Kian felt that he and Nira were not just surviving, they were beginning to grow together. The morning on Zion was unusually quiet, almost too quiet. Kian and Nira had spent the night in the hidden valley, resting near the freshwater pool. Nira had learned much since their first encounter: how to find water, avoid dangers, and read subtle signs in the environment. But Kian knew the peace was temporary. Zion had a way of testing those who were unprepared. As they packed their small camp, Kian noticed movement on the horizon. Shadows shifting against the rocky cliffs. He crouched low, signaling Nira to do the same. "They're coming," he whispered. "Scavengers, stay close to me." Nira's small hand gripped his tightly, but she did not panic. She had learned from him, and now her courage showed through her fear. The scavengers moved with purpose, their glowing eyes scanning the valley. Kian counted at least 6, heavily armed and armored. They were the same ones who had hunted them before. Kian knew there was no time to run blindly. They needed a plan. He whispered quickly to Nira, "We'll split. You take the side path through the rocks. I'll draw their attention. When it's safe, we meet at the cave entrance." Nira's eyes widened, but she nodded. She trusted Kian completely. "I go. Careful," she said softly. "Exactly," Kian replied, giving her a reassuring squeeze of the hand. As Kian stepped out slightly, making himself visible, the scavengers noticed him immediately. They shouted in their harsh language and advanced. Kian ran, ducking behind rocks, throwing small stones to distract them. Each movement was calculated. He wanted to protect Nira, to keep her hidden. Meanwhile, Nira moved quietly through the narrow path Kian had shown her. Her senses guided her. She could feel the vibrations of the scavengers' footsteps. She moved like a shadow, careful not to make a sound. Her small size worked to her advantage, allowing her to slip between rocks and over ledges. Kian led the scavengers away from the valley, weaving through the terrain, drawing their attention. They were fast, but Kian was faster. He knew the land, and he knew how to use it to his advantage. The creatures lunged and shouted, but Kian was always one step ahead, back along the hidden path. Nira reached a small crevice, a narrow passage that the scavengers could not enter. She paused, catching her breath. For the first time, she realized how much she had grown. She was no longer the helpless, starving child Kian had found days ago. She could think, act, and survive. The scavengers soon realized Kian had disappeared from sight. They turned back, confused. Kian, using a small diversion he had prepared, set off a small rock slide, blocking their path temporarily. It was enough time for him to double back toward Nira. He found her waiting quietly at the meeting point, her eyes bright and alert. "You did well," Kian said softly. "Better than I could have hoped." Nira gave a small nod, smiling faintly. "Learn from you," she said. Kian led her to a safer spot deeper in the valley, where the rocks formed natural walls. The scavengers would have difficulty following them there. Kian set up a small hiding spot, using the terrain to their advantage. That night, as they rested, Kian reflected on the day. Nira had grown not just in skill, but in courage. She had faced danger and had not faltered. He realized that her survival was not just about physical strength, it was about intelligence, observation, and bravery. "Nira," Kian said quietly, "you're stronger than you think. You survived when I found you, and now you face danger with courage. That is something very few can do." Nira looked at him, her eyes wide. "I'm scared," she admitted softly. "That's okay," Kian replied. "Courage isn't about not being scared. It's about facing your fear, even when you are afraid. And you did that today." Nira's small shoulders relaxed. For the first time, she felt proud of herself. She had been alone and terrified, but now she had someone to guide her, and she had learned to be brave. The days that followed were filled with quiet training and cautious exploration. Kian taught Nira how to read the stars to navigate, how to find edible plants, and how to detect signs of other creatures. Nira's abilities continued to grow. She could sense vibrations in the ground and hear movements far beyond Kian's capacity. Together, they became a team to beings learning from each other, protecting each other, and growing stronger. One afternoon, as they rested near a shallow cliff, they noticed a faint signal in the distance. It was a small beacon, likely left by humans or another alien survivor. Kian's eyes lit up. That could be a sign of help or danger. We need to investigate carefully. Nira nodded, her amber eyes shining with curiosity and determination. Together, she whispered. Kian smiled. Together, he agreed. Their journey on Zion was far from over. But with every challenge, every close call, and every lesson learned, they were becoming more than just survivors. They were partners, each one completing the other's strengths. Each one learning to face the harsh world with courage and intelligence. That night, as they watched Zion's twin moons rise over the rocky cliffs, Kian felt hope. Nira was no longer just a fragile, starving child. She was a survivor, a learner, and a friend, and together, they could face whatever dangers Zion held because they had something stronger than fear, trust, courage, and the bond they had built. The next morning, Zion's pale sun rose slowly over the rocky cliffs. Kian and Nira had traveled far from the hidden valley, guided by a faint signal they had noticed the day before. The journey was tiring, but both of them had grown stronger. Kian's steps were steady, and Nira's sharp senses kept them safe from dangers that might have gone unnoticed before. As they climbed a narrow ridge, the signal grew stronger. Kian scanned the horizon carefully. In the distance, he saw a small structure, half buried in sand and rubble. Its walls were metallic, glinting in the sunlight. That must be the source, he said, pointing. It could be abandoned, or someone might still be here. Nira's eyes widened with curiosity. Safe? She asked softly. Kian smiled. We'll find out. Stay close. As they approached, they saw signs of life, footprints in the sand, small pieces of equipment scattered near the entrance. The building was old, possibly a human alien outpost from years ago. Kian's heart raced with hope. Inside, they might find supplies, communication devices, or even records of other survivors. They entered cautiously. The interior was dusty but intact. Kian found a storage area filled with ration packs, clean water, and basic medical supplies. Nira's eyes widened in amazement. She had never seen such organized resources. Look, Nira, Kian said, handing her a water pack. This will help us last longer. Nira took it carefully. Almost reverently, she had survived on scraps for so long that even a simple supply of clean water and food seemed like treasure. She smiled faintly, her eyes shining with gratitude. As they explored further, Kian found a communication device, a small, portable transmitter. This could allow us to contact human allies, he said. We could call for help, or at least learn if anyone else is nearby. Nira leaned closer. Curious, Kian showed her how it worked. Pressing buttons carefully and explaining the symbols, her small fingers moved quickly, learning fast. For the first time, she realized that technology, which once seemed foreign and intimidating, could be a tool to help them survive. After hours of careful exploration, they found a small room filled with records, data about Zion, maps of safe zones, and information about alien species. Nira's amber eyes sparkled with interest. She pointed to one of the maps. My people may be here, she asked. Kian examined the map and saw traces of her tribe's last known location. It's possible, he said cautiously. Some of your people might still be alive. We'll have to be careful, but this gives us hope. Nira's small body trembled with emotion. For the first time in a long while, she felt that not everything was lost. She was not completely alone. She had Kian, and now she had a chance to learn about her people and maybe even find them again. That evening, as they prepared to rest in the outpost, Kian reflected on the day. Nira had grown so much, not just in skill but in hope. Her trust in him and her growing confidence were proof that even in the harshest worlds, life could adapt and endure. Suddenly, a faint noise outside caught their attention. Kian's instincts kicked in. Stay inside, he whispered. I'll check. He peeked through a small window and saw a group of strange figures moving along the ridge. They were smaller than the scavengers, but fast and alert. Kian quickly analyzed the situation. These were likely explorers or scouts from another group. He needed to approach carefully. He returned to Nira. We might have company, he said, quietly, but it doesn't seem hostile. Yet, I'll go and try to communicate. You stay here. Nira's small hand reached for his. Together, she said firmly. Kian nodded. Together, he agreed. He stepped outside slowly, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. The figures stopped, observing him cautiously. Kian spoke in a universal translator, introducing himself and explaining that he and Nira were survivors. After tense moments, the group lowered their weapons slightly. They were explorers from a nearby human colony, also mapping Zion. Relief washed over Kian. This meant they were not entirely alone. Help might be closer than he thought. Kian returned to Nira, smiling. They're friendly. We're not alone. Nira's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of joy. She had feared being alone forever, but now she realized that hope was real. Kian knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. We have a chance, he said softly, to find safety, and maybe even your people. We'll face it together. Nira nodded, her trust and determination stronger than ever. For the first time in her life, she felt that the future was something she could face with courage, not fear. That night, they slept in the outpost, feeling safer than they had in weeks. Kian and Nira knew the journey ahead would not be easy. Zion was still dangerous, and there were many unknown threats. But for the first time, they had hope that they could survive, hope that Nira could find her people, and hope that their bond could overcome any challenge. As the twin moons of Zion rose in the sky, casting silver light across the valley, Kian and Nira sat together at the outpost entrance. Nira looked up at the stars, her small hands gripping Kian's. Tomorrow, she said softly. We find them, yes, Kian replied. Tomorrow, we take the next step. We face the dangers, but we face them together, and for the first time since their journey began, both of them felt a deep sense of purpose. They were no longer just surviving, they were building a path forward, a path that held hope, courage, and the possibility of reunion with what had once been lost. In the quiet of the Zion night, Kian realized something important. Human kindness, courage, and intelligence had brought them this far, but it was their trust in each other, the bond between human and alien, that would carry them through the challenges yet to come. Together, they were ready to face whatever awaited them. The morning on Zion was tense. Kian and Nira had planned carefully. The outpost they had discovered yesterday offered them a chance to strike back against the scavengers who had been hunting Nira. But they needed to be smart. The scavengers were strong, organized, and dangerous. Yet Kian knew that with strategy, intelligence, and courage, even humans could overcome them. Today, Kian said quietly as they prepared, we don't just hide. We take the fight to them. But we stay smart. We protect each other. Nira's amber eyes shone with determination. Together, she whispered. Yes, together, Kian agreed. They left the outpost and moved silently through the rocky terrain. Kian had studied the scavengers' patterns and knew where they would be. He had gathered small devices from the outpost, alarms, traps, and a few old tools. With these, he could create distractions and control the battlefield. Nira followed closely, her senses alert. She could hear movements far away, notice changes in the wind, and detect vibrations in the ground. Her abilities, combined with Kian's strategy, made them a formidable team. As they approached the scavengers' camp, Kian signaled Nira to hide behind a ridge while he drew the enemies out. Carefully, he created a small diversion, tossing rocks to make noise and triggering one of the traps he had prepared. The scavengers noticed immediately, moving toward the source of the disturbance. Nira watched, her heart racing, but she trusted Kian completely. She remembered everything he had taught her: how to stay hidden, how to stay calm, and how to act when the moment came. Kian led the scavengers on a chase. Using the rocky terrain to confuse them, They tripped over loose stones, shouted to each other, and fell into small pitfalls Kian had prepared. Each move was precise, clever, and deliberate. The human mind, with strategy and ingenuity, was proving stronger than brute force. Meanwhile, Nira slipped silently into the camp. She found the prisoners, small alien survivors who had been captured by the scavengers. Their eyes widened as she approached, recognizing a friend in the small, determined girl. Nira used hand signals and whispered instructions, guiding them quietly out of the camp. Her bravery and intelligence shone brightly. Kian returned to the camp after a careful loop, meeting Nira at the edge. Together, they led the rescued aliens through a hidden passage, avoiding the confused scavengers. Kian's quick thinking and Nira's alert senses kept them safe. Hours passed as they navigated the rugged landscape, but finally, they reached a safe zone, a small valley surrounded by cliffs. Hidden from view, the rescued aliens were tired, frightened, but safe. Nira's small hands held one of the youngest survivors as Kian helped others with food and water. "You saved them," Kian said, looking at Nira with admiration. "You were brave, smart, and careful. I'm proud of you." Nira looked down, shy but happy. "Learn from you," she said softly. "No," Kian replied, smiling. "We learn from each other. That's what made this possible." The aliens began to recover, eating and drinking, and Nira stayed close to Kian, helping where she could. Her bond with him had grown stronger than ever. She realized that humans, though different, could be heroes. Their courage, intelligence, and kindness were extraordinary. As the day ended, Kian and Nira sat near a small fire, watching the rescued aliens rest. Kian thought about everything they had faced, the hunger, the fear, the danger, and how far they had come. "This," Kian said softly, "is what humans can do, even in a harsh world like Zion. We can protect, we can help, and we can overcome, not with strength alone, but with thinking, caring, and courage." Nira looked at him, her eyes wide. "Human strong," she said simply. "Yes," Kian replied, "strong, but also kind. That's what makes the difference." That night, as Zion's twin moons rose, Kian reflected on the day. The scavengers had been defeated, but the mission was more than just survival. It was a lesson hope could exist even in the darkest places. And it was not just Kian's hope, but Nira's, and now the hope of the rescued aliens too. Nira curled up beside him, her small body relaxed for the first time since their journey began. She had faced danger, led others to safety, and learned that courage and trust could overcome even the greatest threats. She felt stronger, braver, and more confident in herself. Kian looked at her and smiled. "You've grown so much, Nira. Not just in strength, but in heart. You're a true survivor." Nira's small smile was faint but real. "Thanks, Kian." Together, they watched the moons rise over the cliffs, casting silver light over the valley. The rescued aliens slept safely, unaware of the dangers that had once surrounded them. And for Kian and Nira, this was a victory not just of survival, but of courage, intelligence, and trust. The bond between human and alien had grown stronger. Kian had proven that humans, even alone in a strange world, could make a difference. And Nira had shown that courage and intelligence could overcome fear. Together, they were more than survivors, they were heroes. As the night deepened, Kian thought about the future. Nira's people might still exist, and the rescued aliens could help rebuild hope on Zion. He knew the journey was not over, but now they had a chance to make a real difference tomorrow. Kian whispered, "We continue. We find your people. Nira, we protect them, and we build a better future together." Nira's small hand reached for his, gripping it tightly. "Together," she said. "Together," Kian repeated. Under Zion's twin moons, a human and an alien girl rested side by side, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. They had survived hunger, fear, and danger. Now, they would fight for hope, trust, and the future together. The morning light of Zion spilled over the rocky horizon, casting long shadows across the valley. Kian and Nira had spent the night with the rescued aliens, resting and planning their next steps. The hope of finding Nira's people filled the air, giving everyone energy and determination. Kian packed supplies carefully, checking rations, water, and small tools. "We need to be ready," he said. "The journey ahead will test us, but we've grown stronger. Together, we can face it." Nira watched him, her amber eyes shining. "Together," she said softly. "Yes," Kian replied, "always together." They led the group through narrow paths and hidden valleys. Avoiding the remnants of scavenger patrols, Nira's senses guided them, detecting vibrations in the ground and subtle sounds in the wind. Kian relied on her guidance as much as she relied on his experience and knowledge. Together, they moved like a single team, careful, patient, and strong. After several hours of careful travel, they reached a plateau overlooking a distant settlement. From afar, they could see small structures and smoke rising into the sky. Kian squinted, trying to identify the inhabitants. "Your people," Nira whispered, her small hand gripping his. Her voice trembled with a mixture of hope and fear. "Maybe," Kian nodded. "Stay calm. We approach slowly and carefully. We don't know if it's safe yet." They descended the rocky paths, moving silently toward the settlement. The rescued aliens followed, trusting Kian and Nira completely. Nira's heart raced as she spotted figures moving among the buildings her people. Small groups were working, repairing structures, and tending to one another. Some looked sick or injured, but they were alive. As they approached, Nira called out softly, her voice trembling. "Mother, father." The figures turned, eyes widening as they recognized her. Tears filled the eyes of the older aliens, who had feared she was lost forever. Nira ran, her small legs carrying her across the open ground until she was in their arms. The reunion was filled with tears, joy, and relief. Kian stood back, watching quietly. He felt a sense of pride and satisfaction. This was the moment he had hoped for, not just survival, but reunion, hope, and a new beginning. One of the elders approached him, bowing slightly in gratitude. "You saved our children," the elder said in a deep, calm voice. "We owe you more than words can express. You brought hope when all seemed lost." Kian shook his head. "I didn't do it alone," he said. "The courage of your people and the bravery of Nira made this possible. We all worked together." Nira smiled shyly, still clinging to her parents. "Kian helped," she said softly. The elders nodded, acknowledging her words. Kian felt warmth in his heart. The human effort, combined with trust, courage, and care, had changed the course of this small community. They were safe again, thanks to him and Nira. Over the next few days, Kian helped the settlement recover. He shared knowledge of survival, strategy, and simple tools to improve their safety. Nira worked beside him, teaching her people what she had learned: how to use their senses, how to stay alert, and how to trust. The settlement began to thrive. The rescued aliens integrated with the community, and the elders welcomed Kian and Nira as heroes. Nira's people were no longer lost, and hope had returned to their lives. One evening, as the twin moons of Zion rose over the valley, Kian and Nira sat quietly on a hill overlooking the settlement. The air was calm, and the soft sounds of life filled the night. "You did it," Kian said softly. "You found your people." Nira smiled, leaning against him. "We did it," she corrected gently. "Together," Kian nodded. "Yes, together. That's the most important part: trust, courage. And working together can overcome even the toughest challenges." Nira looked at him with admiration. "Human, strong, kind." Kian chuckled softly. "Thank you, Nira. But it's not just strength. It's care, and it's learning from each other. That's what makes the difference." The night passed peacefully. For the first time in weeks, there were no dangers looming, no scavengers hunting, no hunger to fear, only the quiet strength of a community that had survived and thrived. In the following weeks, Kian helped the settlement build more secure shelters, organize food storage, and create communication systems. Nira taught children and adults alike about observation, caution, and using their senses to detect danger. The human lessons combined with alien instincts created a stronger, smarter community. One day, as they worked together, Nira looked at Kian and whispered, "You changed everything." Kian smiled. "We changed everything, together, and this is just the beginning. You and your people can grow stronger, safer, and wiser. The future is yours to build." Nira's small hand reached for his, holding it firmly. "Together," she said, "yes, together." Kian agreed. Years later, the settlement would remember the human who had arrived alone, guiding, protecting, and inspiring. They would speak of the courage of a small alien girl who learned to trust, act, and lead. And the story would be told as a testament to the power of kindness, intelligence, and cooperation, the very essence of human ingenuity and spirit. As the twin moons of Zion shone overhead, Kian and Nira stood side by side, looking at a thriving community filled with life, laughter, and hope. They had survived hunger, danger, and fear. They had rescued others, reunited families, and shown that courage and intelligence could overcome any obstacle. Together, human and alien had proven that even in the harshest world, hope could grow, and kindness could triumph. And together, they faced the future, ready for whatever challenges might come, confident that with courage, trust, and teamwork, anything was possible.